The people bomb. Overwhelming, dramatic, ugly. But some of the solutions are just as disastrous. Mahendra Singh, a chauffeur and father of three, still relives the terror. 1975, New Delhi, India. It was broad daylight. What were you feeling when police surrounded you on this bridge?
I was scared. They said they were arresting me under the Emergency Act. I knew that I better not argue and just go with them.
Singh was forced to have a vasectomy.
I told my wife, and after that I started drinking. Now it has reached a point that if I don't drink, I cannot get through the day. I cannot sleep.
Scared by the fallout of a global people bomb, too many governments have done too little, waited too long, then panicked, turning family planning into population control by force or coercion. Take India. In one 19-month period in the middle 70s, millions were sterilized, mostly the poor. The backlash forced Indira Gandhi out of office, and shaken politicians swore they'd never make the same mistake again. Vishaka, India, a poor fishing village on India's east coast. In 1986, more than 30,000 people were sterilized in 1 month. Not forced, they say, tricked by an unfulfilled city government promise of land and loans. Today, people like Lashmi are still angry.
After getting sterilized, I was told to go out there and put up a shack within 3 months. I sold all my jewelry to build the house, and they came and bulldozed it. We lost our health and all the money we had. All we have left is a piece of paper.
Polo Rao, a fisherman, earns less than $1 a day, barely enough to feed his family. So the government's offer was one he and his wife could not refuse.
We had hoped we could do something with our lives. The government has let us down.
The anger in this village has not been quelled by some government admissions that mistakes were made.
When this time is very short, it's not possible to reconcile all these figures. And sometimes these things happen.
We are all angry with the government. We would have been better off without the sterilization, without being cut up. All those government sons of bitches have not helped us a bit since the operation.
New Delhi, 1988. Maraji Raju was victimized by a sterilization scam.
I was poor. I had lost my job and needed money. A guy came up to me and told me he knew of a job that needed to be done. When we reached the hospital, I realized what the job was. I was to be sterilized.
The scam stemmed from pressure on government agencies to have a percentage of their employees sterilized each month. The employees who wanted to avoid it paid others to take their place.
I had a wife and 2 kids and no money, so I did it.
India today, a sterilization camp outside Jaipur in one of the country's most populous states. Critics call it the assembly line of degradation and death.
Camps are set up in small places. Hundreds of sterilizations are done in a short period of time. Instruments are not sterilized properly, and the follow-up care is not done. That's why you will find cases of paralysis, heavy internal bleeding, even death.
I talked to one doctor who said that he is doing 45 sterilizations an hour in these camps. Is that too many?
Far, far too many. Nobody can do so many of these operations maintaining the surgical norms and the surgical standards. It's just impossible.
The women are not treated with dignity like human beings. The whole experience is so traumatic and dehumanizing.
An estimated 5,000 women die in India every year from sterilization complications. Die from the rush to control the population, from the pressure to meet quotas.
We have taken the people for granted. We are setting targets for them. We are telling them what method is good for them. We are deciding how many children are good for them. In return, what are we giving to the people?
We had a kind of a simplistic approach that you do family planning and there's population control.
And still, India's population grows. At the current rate, it will exceed China's after the turn of the century. This year, the government is considering a more holistic approach. Throw out incentives, improve the status of women, widespread education, better health care. But some believe India will be buried under the crush of too many people before those new measures have time to work.
I think we will have to use mandatory sterilization and the government will have to be strict about it. I think the time has come. It is now.
Politicians are still saying that could never happen again. But each time a newborn cries out, the pressure on India intensifies.
The morning sun turns its blank stare on Smoky Mountain. A community built on a trash dump. A part of Manila where 25,000 human beings subsist among the methane fumes, scavenging hope and survival from the droppings of garbage trucks. For many children, the only way out of this life is a little pine box.
He was born prematurely. Then we're really not sure what happened. The hospital told us he died from an infection.
At age 20, Romelita Gonzalez is left with only one child. How large a family do you want to have?
I want a small family because my husband is just a scavenger. We can't afford a lot of children.
She plans to try for one more and then start taking birth control pills. That is, if her conscience allows. Like 80% of Filipinos, Romelita is Roman Catholic, and her church has a word for those who would use artificial contraception.
Sinners are sinners.
Yes?
Yes. If they know it to be wrong, they understand it to be wrong, and they nevertheless do it, then they would be sinners.
If, in a conjugal union, the possibility of conceiving a child is artificially eliminated, the couple has closed themselves to God and opposed His will.
Powerful words that aren't always heeded, but provoke soul-searching and controversy in some of the poorest, most overpopulated regions of the world. In Latin America, which has the largest Catholic population. In Africa, where church membership has grown more than 50% in the last decade. But it's here in Asia, in the Philippines, where church and state have collided with the biggest bang, where Catholic leaders have used their moral and political muscle to paralyze a once successful birth control program. This in a nation where half the population, 30 million people, live in desperate poverty, and thousands of new hungry mouths join the crowd each day.
We love Marcos!
We love Marcos.
Less than a decade ago, the government of Ferdinand Marcos provided family planning education and free contraception to hundreds of thousands of women through a well-funded effort to keep the Philippine population from spiraling out of control. But in 1986, when the Catholic Church helped Corazon Aquino into power, things changed. Government funding dried up. Contraceptive supplies ran out. And today, this is the national headquarters of the Philippines Family Planning Program.
With all due respect, how do you feel about the fact that this operation has been stuck in an old warehouse in the back of the health compound?
By standards of the Department of Health, it's a good place. By standards of the international community, perhaps no.
And do you consider the amount of money that you're being provided by the government enough to get this job done?
No.
Anywhere near it?
No.
In a matter of a few years, the number of Filipino women using contraception dropped by 20%.
Would that have been a moral victory?
I myself would consider it a moral victory if the indiscriminate distribution of artificial contraceptives had been, so to say, at least limited.
The church contends that injustice, not overpopulation, is the big problem in the Philippines, that too few control too much of the wealth, and that's what must change.
If there will be justice, so that part of this wealth will trickle down to the poor, there will be no need to tell them to plan their families.
But in a place like Smoky Mountain, hopes and theories do not satisfy hunger, and spiritual convictions don't square easily with reality. "28-year-old Mario Estember is a father of 3. Like most in Smoky Mountain, his living depends on the resaleable or recyclable items he can scavenge out of the daily deliveries of Manila's trash. It is a life he and his wife Nida hope dearly not to inflict on any more children.
Life is so hard. If we have more children, I pity them because they will just suffer.
Still, believing it to be evil, the Estembers will not use artificial birth control. Instead, Nida keeps track of her menstrual cycle in order to avoid sex on her fertile days. The so-called rhythm method of natural family planning, which the church does condone, also a method that frequently fails.
If I become pregnant, we would love the child because the Lord gave it to us. And who knows, that child might be the one to help us later on.
Mario, is there any limit to the number of children that you would have if the Lord gave them to you?
If He gives me more, I will accept what He gives me.
They are gifts of God.
Next, I am giving the immunization. I am giving the medicines of leprosy. I am giving the medicines.
At the government health clinic that serves the Smoky Mountain community, there is deep empathy for the young mothers who must raise their children in such squalor. There is a small supply of birth control pills and condoms, but there's also a staff that would prefer not to give them out.
I should not say this because I am a public health worker, but I am also a Roman Catholic. So we know very well that the church is against this.
Is against?
Family planning. Artificial at that.
So deep within you, you're against it as well?
If I may say so.
The word of authority.
Using contraceptives and medicines to prevent life is not what the Lord wants. We should give life, not prevent it.
A mother's dilemma.
If you have too many children, you can't afford to feed them. then what would we do?
A question of survival for a poor community and a nation caught between a future of uncontrolled population growth or of violating its religious beliefs.
On the outskirts of La Paz, Bolivia, police make a grim discovery. The body of a tiny infant is hidden away in the tall grass. Another dead baby, this one choked moments after birth, then thrown away. Infanticide is on the rise here, the last desperate act of impoverished women who feel they have no choice, the most violent form of population control. Bolivia is a country of extremes. It is the poorest nation in South America with the highest birth rate. And the women having most of the children are the ones least able to care for them. It's a tragic irony in a country that's underdeveloped and underpopulated. With only 7 million people, government-sponsored family planning is not a priority.
Even if they have more than 10 children, we're not going to say you have to stop it. The only thing we say is you can stop it if you want to. And if you want to, we're going to help you.
But in the isolated towns and villages of the countryside, where half of all Bolivians live, women have no choices. This is San Pedro, one of the most remote towns in one of the most remote countries in Latin America. The primitive road to get here is passable only part of the year. Such isolation makes it extremely difficult for people in this area to get any services at all, much less basic information about family planning. Florencia Charque lives on a small farm just outside of town. Here, life has gone unchanged for generations. At 41, she has 10 children and is pregnant with her 11th. I have a lot of sadness because of this, she says. I want to stop having children, but I don't know how. Carmen Romero teaches family planning to rural women like Florencia. But Carmen works for the Catholic Church, so she can talk only about the natural method, struggling to teach illiterate women to count the days of their menstrual cycle, advising them to abstain from sex during periods of high fertility. In this male-dominated society, it's a method that rarely works.
Husbands come home drunk and they oblige their wives to have sex. Women have little control over the situation, and that's why we need other methods of contraception.
But those methods simply aren't available in these isolated communities. 70% of Bolivian women do not have access to contraceptives. Most of them live in rural areas. Little is being done to reach these women, and what's available is usually not financed by the Bolivian government. The money for this program, a mobile health clinic, comes mainly from the U.S. government. It uses Bolivia's limited rail system to reach some isolated areas. Though a variety of services is offered here, many women who come to this clinic are looking for ways to have fewer children. Women like Marta de Llosa, a mother of 9.
I don't want any more children. I'll take anything that will stop them from coming.
There are other women with the same needs as Marta, but they're reluctant to seek help.
Around here, women are very shy. It takes us a long time to get through. We have to overcome cultural barriers like the belief that women should have large families.
Poverty, isolation, ignorance. poor Bolivian women who want fewer children are struggling with overwhelming obstacles. Yet those in the middle and upper classes who themselves are having fewer children insist there's no need to provide widespread family planning.
I think Bolivia needs more people. For the amount of territory we have, we don't have enough people. We should have 20 million Bolivians.
What we have is a problem of extreme poverty. That's the problem we have. And that is not a problem we are going to solve by family planning, certainly not.
As long as Bolivia's dilemma over population continues, so too will its ambivalence about family planning. With no choices, poor women in the countryside will continue having large families, coping as best they can with their personal population problems. In urban areas, women who can't cope will continue resorting to desperate measures, and more tiny bodies will lie unclaimed in the city's morgue.
They are Indonesia's newest national heroes, come to Jakarta, the capital, in the traditional costumes of their remote villages, to be personally honored by President Suharto, not for battlefield courage or economic genius, but for using birth control.
Your participation is a valuable contribution to the development of our nation.
A population success story with a dark side and a future in doubt. "20 years ago, Indonesia had already grown to be the 5th most populous nation on earth and one of the poorest. 60% lived in slums and squalor, and with women bearing an average of 6 children, the government feared catastrophe. Then things changed. In the early 70s, the income from Indonesia's energy exports skyrocketed, a consequence of the Arab oil embargo. Jakarta sprouted a sleek skyline on a foundation of banks and international investment. Some of the slums with open sewers gave way to fancy hotels and shopping malls for a growing middle class. But according to President Suharto, that was only half the battle.
Improving the economy is important, but we also have to slow down the growth of our population, so there will be some balance between the two.
Indonesia launched one of the most ambitious family planning programs in the world. This land of ancient Muslim tradition became obsessed with modern birth control. Popular culture portrayed small families as prosperous and happy. Family planning shirts became a fashion statement.
You see here the condom. Somewhere here you see the pill, and you see also the IUD.
This is a badge of honor.
Yes, this is a badge of honor.
And a giant birth control bureaucracy was born, an impressive headquarters, a minister of cabinet rank, plentiful supplies of free contraceptives, and an army of family planning workers with quotas or targets for even the most remote villages.
I get a target every month, 21 new women on birth control.
What happens if you're very successful with your targets?
If I achieve my target, I get a bonus from the village leader. He's also responsible for family planning and has his own target.
Everybody has a target.
Yeah.
The combination of family planning and economic development was a success. Today, Indonesian women have 3 children on average, about half what their mothers did, and poverty has been cut by 2/3. But for all its good points, the Indonesia experience has also produced a sobering lesson for this and other developing nations. Setting population targets has a way of becoming a dangerous game. Play too hard or too fast, and people can get hurt. This woman is having a birth control device removed. It should be practically painless, but the doctor or midwife who first inserted it may have been in a rush or inadequately trained, according to the chief of Indonesia's largest family planning clinic.
In achieving the targets, maybe he or she doing something not very good to the people.
The contraceptive is Norplant, tiny tubes of synthetic hormone surgically placed under the skin. It's designed to prevent pregnancy for up to 5 years. In its birth control crusade, Indonesia has inserted more Norplant than any other country.
We have already achieved the quantity in the family planning program, but not the quality.
In the mid-'80s, the government launched birth control safaris. Colorful but controversial blitzes through the countryside, targeting thousands of women for long-term methods of contraception, like Norplant and intrauterine devices.
This is a motivation program. This is an effort to communicate with the people.
But sometimes the birth control safaris backfire.
Nyonya Suci Rahayu.
Doctors reported infections caused by unsterile instruments. Women were not always informed about possible side effects, and international experts charged Indonesian women had not been motivated by the government, but coerced.
There were some of them come here to have that IUDs or Norplants removed because they felt that they were pushed to have it by the people who organized the safari. If we still continue to pay too much attention on target, then it will, in time, it will jeopardize the whole program.
The government says the safaris have been scaled back, sanitary conditions improved.
We are doing and working very hard because otherwise we will lose the confidence of the people.
But the problems sparked an intense debate over the population program's nature and ultimate fate.
The culture here is that people trust the supervisor, people trust the midwife, people trust the doctor.
I mainly recommend the IUD. The doctors I know say that is the best method.
And the women trust you to know what's best for them?
Yes, they do. They trust me.
But others, like psychologist Nino Wijantoro, contend that trust in so-called authorities will lead to more targets and women getting hurt. They say that only contraceptive education and free choice will work in the long term.
They will feel they are responsible for their choice. If the women have the knowledge, have the total knowledge.
Trust is much more important than the information itself.
We have to enlighten these women, enlighten them.
Like other developing countries, Indonesia is grappling with profound challenges and questions. Can a nation facing a population crisis afford to allow women the freedom to decide whether to use contraception and what kind? Or does the government know best?
If she does not understand, I'll maybe beat her, and then if she does not listen, I'll throw her out.
I tell my children that usually the male is the dominant person in the family.
The woman's position and function in the home is to look after the man.
It should be the man who's the boss because we are the breadwinners.
I'm the boss. If men are not cooperating in this family planning issue, women feel it more difficult to practice it.
Girls become aware very early that their brothers are better off than them. And this in turn feeds the self-image of second-class status.
Poverty breeds high population growth rates, and high population growth rates in turn lead to excessive poverty. And the only way to break this cycle is to invest in people, particularly in the education and health of females.
The moment you emancipate a woman's mind, she takes decisions on her own behalf, and she takes the right decisions. An educated woman knows very well that she can support only a small family and take care of the children with the optimum resources. So she opts for a small family.
It's very clear now that this world cannot contain as many people as we wish. It's a limited planet with limited resources. It's in the interest of all people to reduce the growth of the population and to have only the children they want, the children they can raise.
This is the decade in which we will determine whether the ultimate population of the world is 10, 11 billion or 14 billion.
Springtime in Mexico City, and young lovers retreat into a world of their own. A world where a man's devotion to a woman seems endless. But nearby, the song of the mariachis tells the real story. I am king, they say. I will always do what I want. My word is law. It's an apt description of what happens in Mexico's macho society when the dreams of new love turn into the reality of marriage and children, many children. Antonio Perez has been married for 11 years. He's a supervisor at this car parts factory, overseeing dozens of women. He admits to having affairs with many of them.
I like to make love every single day. I have a very stressful job, and sex helps me relax. But my wife is usually too tired after taking care of the kids all day. So I have the right to find other women.
At the end of the day, Antonio and his co-worker Cecilia, the latest in a long line of mistresses, head to her place where he'll spend an hour or so before going home. Meanwhile, Antonio's wife Isabel is cooking his dinner. Like many Mexican women, she's resigned herself to her husband's infidelity.
I'm not stupid. Of course I know what he's doing. And besides, he admits it. I get very angry, but what can I do? Most men are like this.
Antonio's lifestyle is common not just in Mexico, but in many countries around the world. And so too are the consequences. Children, lots of them. The 5 kids Antonio greets when he arrives home are just the ones he's had with his wife. He's fathered 4 other children with 3 other women.
The common Mexican macho man wants lots of women, lots of children, and takes no responsibility. He doesn't feed them or clothe them. I am not macho because I accept responsibilities.
For the Mexican government, worried about overpopulation, men like Antonio are seen as a threat to the country's future. Mexico has undertaken an ambitious program to educate men, especially young men, to take more responsibility for birth control. Hector Barbosa is one of the success stories. He learned about family planning through a government-endorsed program at the factory where he works. He and his wife Maria have 2 children and another on the way. For them, their 3rd child will be their last.
My wife goes through a lot of pain and discomfort when she has a baby, and now it's my turn to go through a little pain. That's why I'm having a vasectomy.
There are 140 workers at Hector's factory, but he's the only one to have a vasectomy this year. Despite many programs nationwide, men like Hector are rare and often the butt of jokes in a society where most men regard lots of children as a symbol of virility and vasectomy an assault on their manhood. Ideas that are the result of a lack of education, especially among the poor. Those involved in family planning say one of their most difficult challenges is trying to change attitudes in poor neighborhoods like this one. Here on the outskirts of Mexico City, the old ways persist, handed down from father to son.
My father told me, men have to be the boss, not women, and it is wrong for a woman to tell a man what to do. If my wife does that, if she passes the line and lacks respect for me, then I might have to hit her, because men have to be the boss.
Despite statements like that, family planners believe it's a lot easier to change him than it is to change his father. In fact, Mexico has all but given up on older men and is now focusing on the young. In a working-class neighborhood, high school students watch a play in which one actor dramatizes both sides of a familiar story.
I've had over 100 girls. I've had so many girlfriends that my list could compete with even that of Don Juan. I was the king of my school. I was famous and proud of it.
Halfway through his monologue, the actor pulls on a dress and gives the audience the woman's perspective, a technique that's proven effective in reinforcing the play's message with young men.
I believed in your sincerity and gave myself to you. Then you left like a coward, even though I told you I was pregnant. What am I going to do with this baby? This baby that has taken away all my dreams.
The performance is repeated in schools throughout Mexico, and its message seems to be getting through.
I don't want a lot of women. I want one woman and one child. I want to be able to take care of my child and give him everything I wasn't given.
With my wife, I want to be able to talk things over, to reason things out. And I want us both to decide how many children we have.
I would say that we're making some progress. If we are educating young boys to these ideas, to make them more cooperative with their young girls or with their future wives, that's already a success.
It will be some time before Mexico knows for sure if its message is sticking with the young generation, if they will in fact have fewer children, if the mariachis of the 21st century will be singing a different song, one of love, respect, and equality.
Bringing in the Chinese New Year, a year in which another 17 million people will be added to the world's most populous nation. And this year there could be even more. It's the year of the monkey, by tradition a good time for couples to have a baby, even if it bodes badly for China's future.
Unlimited population growth means we won't be able to provide for the basic needs of our people.
Jia Yujia, a family planning worker in Beijing, is China's answer to the problem. Her job is to educate, indoctrinate, and intimidate families to comply with the world's most restrictive population policy, one family, one child. In her modest office, Mrs. Jai keeps track of the 546 women in her district, who's married, who's using birth control, and who's pregnant.
China's view is that reproductive rights belong to the state. Reproductive rights are not something for an individual or even a family to possess.
In the cities, family planning is enforced through a controversial system of rewards and punishments. If you violate the one-child policy, you could jeopardize your job, your housing, your medical benefits, and your food subsidies. It's a system that's produced results.
I haven't come across anyone violating the policy in 12 years. Not one.
But coercion is not the only reason for the success of family planning in the cities. Housing is scarce, the cost of living is rising, and parents can provide some extras if there's only one child. In many families, there's been a real change in attitudes.
The older generations believe that more children is better. The younger generation wants to have just one child.
One child in the cities is now the rule, not the exception. But in the countryside, where 75% of the population lives, it's a dramatically different picture. The one-child policy is falling apart. This is Dongfanghong Village, a bleak, windswept community where 4,000 people earn a tough living from an unforgiving land. Wang Xigui and Yang Gan-en are among nearly 100 families here with 3 children or more. They kept having daughters, so they kept trying for sons, a preference that goes back centuries. Sons can work the fields. Sons support their parents in old age. Sons pass on the family name.
The reason this couple has 3 children was because of pressure from their parents, who still had old-fashioned ideas.
Ironically, the population crisis has become worse in rural China, in large part because of the success of the country's market-oriented economic reforms. With the abolition of people's communes, the revival of family farming, and a growing free market for crops, peasant incomes went up, and the one-child policy went down.
They had money available to simply pay a fine and or a bribe, if that were necessary, in order to have the second child or even the third child and not be bothered.
But now, with more than 100 million peasant women entering their peak childbearing years, China is at a crossroads, facing a crucial choice. Will it return to the brutal enforcement of the one-child policy that produced an international outcry in the early 1980s?
Coercion, in the worst case, was taking people out of their homes to the village clinic.
Literally going to people's houses and taking women off to undergo abortions.
Or will it choose a more moderate approach and risk further population growth?
They don't like coercion, and they don't want to be seen as a country that condones coercion. On the other hand, they are very serious about their population program.
It's a dilemma made more complex by political considerations. Since the Tiananmen Square democracy movement, stability is one of the government's biggest concerns.
Peasants will hit back now. Village officials have been beaten. Village officials have been killed.
Using coercion won't work. Instead, we have to cultivate the support and understanding of the people.
For now, the Chinese government has decided to relax the one-child policy a little. Peasants whose first child is a girl can now try one more time for a boy. And family planning workers are told to use social pressure, not physical coercion, to accomplish their goals. Against this backdrop, some experts have begun to argue that China should concentrate more on overall economic growth and less on population control. It's a formula that's worked in other Asian countries, but for now, the official line remains firm. China cannot afford to further relax its family planning program.
We really need to reduce the population. Right now, we feel that during the peak birth period of the 1990s, we won't be able to change our present policy.
There's an old Chinese saying, more children, more happiness. For more than a decade, the government has tried to turn that saying on its head with only partial success. So today, the old concerns remain. Disappearing farmland. An increasingly degraded environment. And questions about human rights. There are no easy answers. hanging in the balance, with each passing year, the future of one of the world's biggest people bombs.
This is India's surprise. People here call it the land of green magic. Kerala, on the southwest tip of one of the world's fastest growing countries. But the magic is not just the beauty, rather the dramatic drop in family size. Consider this. Sri Kumari was married at age 18, can read and write, has 2 young daughters, and is sterilized.
I believe my children should be fed and educated. If we had more children, how would we do that?
Accepted thinking by Western standards, astonishing in developing countries. But the people of Kerala have stunned the world on a number of fronts. Birth rate, lowest in India, comparable to developed countries. Infant deaths, fewest in the country. Life expectancy, the highest, and the only state in India where women outnumber men. All this in one of the world's poorest regions, proving to some it doesn't take a large treasury chest to control the population.
These are lessons can be transplanted and used everywhere.
But there is a dark side. India's highest unemployment, the highest suicide rate, consequences of the failure to address economic development. And that's confused observers trying to determine if Kerala's success with population control can be exported.
Definitely there is a downside to Kerala, and that has now become a major question in the 80s and in the early 90s.
Kerala's success is due to its holistic approach to population control, a complete menu that has dramatically slowed the birth rate. A menu that includes a commitment to reading and writing. And it's not just the men who have the education. Most of the girls go through all of the grades here, unlike the rest of India, where only about 1/4 of the women are literate.
In the fight against overpopulation, I would place literacy, female literacy, as the #1. It is the most enduring contraceptive for the third world. There's no doubt about it. It's because you find that the moment you emancipate a woman's mind, she takes decisions on her own behalf, and she takes the right decisions.
Sri Kumari has had 10 years of education. Her husband, Prema Shadram, a construction worker, 9. But with very little income, they talked over what they had read about family planning after the birth of their second child.
Because of education, we came to think that if we have more children, it will be economically difficult to raise them.
Good health care was another big factor in the family's decision.
I'm not afraid they will die. They have taken all of the vaccination injections that are necessary, and there are hospitals around if there's a problem with the kids.
Kerala has proven that when fewer children die, families are smaller. Health clinics are spread across Kerala, and with a good system of roads, rural areas are served as effectively as urban. State-owned food stores try to assure good health by supplying basic food items for the poor at low cost. And in the schools, the needy get a free hot lunch. Kerala's focus on health and education is historical. Dating back to the 1800s, when Christian missionaries taught the untouchables in the caste system how to read and write, and kind rulers built schools and hospitals. In the 1950s, the communists came to power, teaching the people how to organize.
They demanded higher wages, better working conditions, some security of employment. So these are the ways in which the Communist Party began the organization of labor in this state.
The communists also allowed more people to own their own land, producing a feeling of security.
The party lost the election in 1991, but remains a powerful force, still organizing, still demonstrating.
And though its chants resound strongly through the working class, the same communist system credited with advancing family planning is also blamed for contributing to Kerala's dark side.
On the economic front, it's appalling that Kerala is perhaps the highest unemployment rate in India. I have a study done on the health status of Kerala, which shows that the mortality rate has come down, but the morbidity or the sickness rate has gone up. There are now victims of diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart attacks, and a high rate of suicides, mental tension. So this does not improve the quality of life.
The extremes of Kerala's successes and failures have sparked debate.
If India becomes Kerala, God save us. It would be a disaster.
If the other parts of the world, particularly in the third world, in Africa, give as much importance to female education as Kerala did, and would really go full into it, obviously, yes, it is a success story which can be exported and transplanted to other parts of the world.
The challenge for the world is how to copy Kerala's family planning success while avoiding the economic pitfalls.
Left unsolved, the world's population problems will go on to create even larger conflicts between rich and poor, between people and nations vying for the same resources: clean air, water, decent food, and jobs. The people bomb can be diffused. This critical decade offers reasons for both profound concern and genuine hope. For everyone at CNN Special Reports, I'm Mark Walton.